You are listening to Smart Women's Dating Podcast, episode number 43. Welcome to Smart Women's Dating Podcast. I am your host, certified life coach Lærke Nielsen, and I help smart, independent women attract the love they deeply desire without having to chase or settle. This podcast will give you the mindset tools and insights you need to finally crack the code to your love life. Are you ready? Then let's go. Hey there, welcome back to the podcast. And if you're new, then welcome. I'm glad you're here. Today, I want to talk about trust because this is so fundamental to any kind of relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship, a friendship, or a professional connection. And I often hear from women who have a history with men, which most of us have, that they struggle to trust men. They might have experienced men that were not reliable, or someone who didn't follow through on their promises, or who didn't tell the truth. And then, of course, they struggle to believe that they can ever trust a man again. Our brain tries to protect us from this painful situation ever happening again. And we feel that we are more safe by not trusting any man, as a general rule. But that usually doesn't serve us because there has to be a minimal level of trust and believing in the good of other people in order to even have something to build a relationship on. So I want to turn it a little bit upside down now and offer you a different perspective because it all begins with trusting yourself. So instead of asking yourself to trust a man, then ask yourself, how can I trust myself with a man? So what does it even look like to trust yourself with a man, and what is that all about? What are the upsides and benefits of building that kind of self-trust? And what are some ways that you can do that? This is what I'll be talking about in this episode. We're gonna just take a little break because I have something important to share. I have throughout the past 2.5 years taken everything that I found was important and useful in dating and distilled it down to a 3-step process. This is the process that I teach in my 5-month program for strong, independent women. And I'm sharing this process with you in my upcoming masterclass that I call 3 Steps to Attract Love. These are the 3 steps where if you keep your focus on mastering those, you will have success in dating. It's as simple as that. On the masterclass, I will teach you what those 3 steps are and why they are important, and in particular, why they are important for strong, independent women. And I will give you one tool for each of the steps so you can get started on your own. You have to join this masterclass if you want to find out what the 3 steps are and how you can use them to attract your ideal partner. The masterclass is free and it would be Thursday, the 12th of October at 8 p.m. Central European Time. And if you cannot join, then sign up anyway because you will receive a replay afterwards. And you can sign up on the link in the show notes. So let's start by looking at what it even means to trust yourself with a man. Now, self-trust is very much built from honoring your boundaries. It's not the only thing, but it's huge. So let's talk about boundaries. You want to become really good at honoring your boundaries in all situations, but before you can do that, you need to know your boundaries. You need to be able to feel them because no one else can do that for you. Boundaries are very personal and only you can tell where yours are. And then, of course, you need to honor them, and that in some cases means communicating them. But it's not always the case. I'll give you some examples in a minute. And then finally, you also need to stick to them. So it doesn't work if you state a boundary and then 5 minutes later, because you see the other person become disappointed, you cancel your boundary because it feels uncomfortable for you to disappoint someone. Then your self-trust goes down the drain. So what if you're not sure that you know your boundaries and you don't think you will be able to react in a way that respects your boundaries when you are in a concrete situation? It's not unusual to be unsure of your boundaries, and there are some boundaries that we might not even realize before they are crossed, before they are violated. We can't know how it feels ahead of time, but you can try to think of some concrete situations ahead of time, especially when it comes to boundaries in dating. So, for instance, you can ask yourself some of these questions about being on the dating apps. Will you share your phone number before meeting someone if they ask? And if not, then what will you say if they ask? Will you let a chat go on and on until after midnight when you haven't met him yet? And if not, then how will you end the conversation? And will you answer very private questions before meeting someone? And how will you respond to let him know if you're not ready for that? So decide both on your boundaries and a way that you want to express them that feels aligned with how you want to show up. Maybe you want to focus on being clear, but still kind and positive. At least if you think the man could be a nice person. You also can ask yourself how much time you want to spend on texting in the app per day. Now, this is an example of a boundary that you don't have to communicate, you just have to honor it. Committing to a maximum time per day and following through on that commitment is also a way to build self-trust. And then you can think of boundaries when you are on a date. Will you decide when to end the date ahead of time? Will you accept an invitation to go home with him? And will you allow him to kiss you, for instance? Think of all different situations and again, also think of how you would like to respond. And if you need some inspiration to do that, you can listen to episode 8 about people pleasing, where I give you some ideas for scripts that you can use. So to say it in short, if you want to say no to the suggestion, but you don't want to say no to the man, you actually like him, but you think his suggestion is not something you're ready for, you want to use what I call the sandwich method. Say something positive, and then tell him no and why, and then tell him what else you could be open to. So an example could be, I'm flattered that you're inviting me home, but it's still too early for me. I only just met you, but I would love to see you again next week. Setting boundaries requires you to know where they are, and again, it's very individual. So you want to practice feeling your yes or no inside. And this can be difficult if you're used to not listening to yourself and take your gut feeling seriously. If you've been conditioned to think of what other people want before your own wants, you might have to retrain that feeling. So you want to practice becoming really honest with yourself. How do I actually feel about this? Am I a yes or a no here? And once you know the answer, then you decide how to communicate it. And as I mentioned earlier, you want to stick with it, and this is how you build self-trust long-term. You want to become your own best partner, someone who is reliable, trustworthy, and consistent with yourself. When you make a commitment to yourself, you stick to this, even if it means disappointing the guy on a date. You are not wavering in a moment when you feel overwhelmed by wanting to be agreeable and nice. And of course, this doesn't mean you can never deviate from your boundaries. There could be specific situations where you want to do that, but then do it consciously and be sure you know your reasons why. Are you really doing this because you want it, or is it because you think you're supposed to? So boundaries are huge when it comes to self-trust, but it's not the only thing. Basically, building self-trust means trusting yourself to follow through on a decision or defending a value or opinion, even if it creates some discomfort for you in the moment. And that discomfort could be coming from disappointing others, surprising others, or even rejecting others. So some examples could be having the courage to disagree with someone, being true to yourself, expressing your opinions even if you don't know how it will be received, or asking for what you want and desire even if it makes you vulnerable to rejection. So deciding to follow through on this and committing to honoring yourself in that sense, even when you feel a little bit shaky inside, this is part of what's going to build your self-trust. So what are then the upsides of doing this work? I want to walk you through that because I think there are some benefits that you might not be aware of. First of all, you show a man that you respect yourself. and this will automatically foster more respect and maybe even admiration from his side. You raise your perceived value in his eyes because a healthy masculine man, he doesn't want a woman who says yes to everything and agrees with everything he says. He actually wants someone who knows her boundaries and who knows her opinions and how to communicate them. This will make him feel more safe, and he will know that when you say yes, you really mean it. And you do him a huge service by showing him your authentic self when you express your opinions. And you also do him a huge service by telling him what you want and desire, because a man who wants to pursue you, he will love to have that guidance from you. And then there's a huge benefit that you might not be aware of, and that is that you get to feel your inner yes more clearly when you become good at saying no. So just think of that for a moment. Your ability to say no, to set boundaries, that creates a safe space for you so that you can feel more clearly when you're a yes. And you can allow yourself to be more free because you have that emotional safety net that your boundaries create. When you've built self-trust, you can be more present and relaxed in the moment because you know you got your own back. And when you know you have the ability to pull out of a situation, you feel more inspired to open up, as opposed to if you oblige yourself to go along with people all the time and never say no. This will only lead you to feel resentment and exhaustion, and you do not feel like opening up. So what are then some ways you can build self-trust? It doesn't have to be big changes. You can begin with something as simple as deciding how long you want your first dates to be. Set a limit and communicate it up front and then follow through. This is already a big step in showing yourself that you can set a boundary and trust yourself to honor it. So imagine telling a man that you have only 1 hour for this date. Now you can really relax and be present in that 1 hour. But if on the other hand it was completely up in the air how long it was going to last, then maybe you're going to have to think of a way to end the date at some point. And it could be hanging in the back of your mind and make you feel uncomfortable and not able to be fully present and enjoy the date. So an example is one of my clients. She always had very long dates because she made herself available to stay as long as the man wanted. And that could in some cases be 6 to 8 hours. And she would feel burnt out and exhausted and completely disempowered to leave because she thought she had to be polite. Cutting that to 1 hour only made dating so much more fun for her, and she was more open to meeting more men, as it wasn't a big deal if it was only 1 hour. And then she could relax and enjoy the date because she always told him up front that she had to leave within an hour. You also want to practice saying no when you feel it's not a good match for you. This is another example from one of my clients. She realized that she tended to meet men who were not very present. They were not showing signs of listening to her when she talked about herself. And that, of course, made her feel unimportant and not valued. But she would stay with them as long as they wanted to be with her. And when she realized that, she decided to say no to a man that she had been dating because he had the same pattern. So even if he wanted to see her again, she decided that now was the time to say no. And that was a whole new situation for her. But it was such a good exercise in valuing herself and trusting herself to take care of her long-term interests and desires and not let his come first. By doing that, she upgraded herself, and she's no longer available for men who don't offer her the attention and presence that she wants in a relationship. So setting boundaries and saying no, of course when you are a no, that is one way to build self-trust, and some other ways could be practice saying your opinion when you disagree. Practice making a decision ahead of time and following through on that. And practice staying true to yourself by expressing what you want and desire. So that was some small practical challenges you can give yourself, and you don't even have to be dating to do this. You can practice this in all kinds of relationships. And then finally, I want to say as a general advice in dating that is also really useful when it comes to trust. Go slow. You are not in a hurry. Allow yourself to get to know someone. See how you interact and connect with them. and do it in a pace that will give you time to also reflect and experience the other person in different situations. Deep trust to another human being is built over time when you see that he is reliable, consistent, and trustworthy, and that he respects your boundaries. So that is also super important, and a side bonus of setting a boundary, you get to see how he reacts, and that will tell you a lot. So this is what I wanted to share with you today, and I hope it was useful. And if you want more personalized advice and you're considering working with a coach, then hop on the link in the show notes and get a free consult call, and then I can tell you about the possibilities of working with me. And if you're listening from a platform with no show notes, then go to my website, lærkethelovecoach.com. Thank you so much for listening and have a wonderful week. If you like what you're hearing on this podcast and you want to get support from a coach on your love journey, I invite you to book a free consult call with me. You will find the link in the show notes. And also, don't forget to subscribe, and I would love it if you would rate and review this podcast, and then you'll also help other women find it.